So welcome to everybody for the first event of 2018. I'm suffering a sort of temporary hearing problem at the moment, so I only have 25% reception. So I'm actually going to hand over and let Kevin run this evening, and I'm going to focus on a non-speaking role where on a non-listening role. I'm going to be driving the IT for this evening. So over to you, Kevin.
Okay, thanks, Don. Thank you. So, yep, as Don said, welcome to the first event of 2018. As many of you who went to our events last year know, we're looking to increase the use of IT and social media in the branch to accommodate our branch members who live slightly too far away to get to our evening events. And as you'll see, we've got 2 laptops and 2 cameras here. We have currently 13 people online who are watching this event, and Josephine is also recording it, and we'll post that up on the LinkedIn, presumably, yep, on our LinkedIn site, so that you'll be able to download the whole recording and watch in your own free time in your pyjamas if you want to. For those who are listening in online, if you can use the chat, Don will be monitoring the chat so that you'll be able to ask questions of the speaker later. For those in the room, fire exits are out through those doors following the green light, and the assembly point out in the car park. It looks like most of you have filled in the attendance register, which is just outside the door. If you haven't, could you do so? Because that will enable us to send you out your certificate of attendance, which Priyanka will be doing after the meeting online. And also, on your seats, you've got the event feedback form, and after the event, CQI will also be sending you an event feedback form as well if you want to fill that in online after the event, so that you want your comments recorded anonymously, and also for those who are listening in from the comfort of their own homes or offices. Our next event is on the 13th of March, and that is the Women in Quality panel discussion, which the details of which have been up on the screen so far. So we have 5 high-profile panelists there, and that's likely to be a really popular event. Tickets have only been out for a week, and we've already they're free, but we've already managed to allocate about 1/3 of our total places for that. So if you're interested in coming out to joining that discussion, I'd sign up quickly on that one. As of April, which is our next AGM, Don sadly is going to be standing down as the branch chair, a role which he's managed to hold down for the last 4 years. 4 years, yeah. So we're looking to our branch members for additional support as we reallocate some of the committee members there. So if you're interested, please come and see one of the committee members after the meeting. And yeah, again, we call out if anyone has used any quality tools successfully in the past, then and are willing to give a short 5-minute talk on them. We're looking to have those as an addition to our normal events as an opening slot, just so that we can do a bit more information sharing. It's something that's come out as something that our branch members want. So if it's something you're interested in hearing, hopefully that's something that you're interested in sharing some of your own personal experience, and just a small slot on that. And Don's looking hopefully to do that in the next meeting as well. So it's my pleasure to introduce Martin Brenning-Jones, who's our speaker tonight, and his speech is on Lean Six Sigma for leaders. Martin's an expert in quality and change management and has worked in the field for over 20 years, currently working for Catalyst. And he is also the author of the book Lean Six Sigma for Dummies, and hopefully it should be a very entertaining speech. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you very much indeed.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. So good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me to come and talk this evening. And it was funny actually, because you mentioned people sitting at home in their pyjamas watching this, and so I've got this image now in my mind. I'm sorry about that. The funny thing is, this morning at 8 o'clock this morning, I was actually running a webinar myself to delegates who are actually out in Kenya, who are interested in the demystification of Lean Six Sigma. And I'm not going to tell you what I wasn't wearing for that webinar at 8 o'clock in the morning. but let's put it this way, that I think breakfast was getting in the way somehow along the lines. So set your expectations for this afternoon, this evening, and what I am going to cover and what I'm not going to cover. One thing is for sure, I'm not going to try and turn you into Jedi or black belts or anything like that. You're not going to be phased with technical tools and techniques on Lean Six Sigma. It's going to be much more my personal story about what happened to me, and particularly the focus, as the title suggests, is on Lean Six Sigma for leaders. Hopefully during the way we can talk a bit about what is Lean Six Sigma anyway. But I thought it'd be useful to kind of put that in context really about my personal, if you like, the journey I've been on in my career and where I've got to, and what I believe in as well. So. Who are you? I mean, I was going to say, who am I, and introduce myself a little bit more, but I'd be interested to know a little bit more about, who you are. I mean, I worry about that sort of title of, great expert in this, that, and the other, when I think by the sense of the people I've been talking to so far, there's a lot of expertise in the room. So by way of, we could do a kind of introduction by show of hands. I'm not quite sure if this will work for our friends on the other side of the kind of in the cloud. You're in the cloud, as far as we're concerned. So have we got any kind of Lean Six Sigma gurus out there? Any black belts by any chance? Oh wow, well done, Kevin. You're a black belt.
Yes.
Okay, master black belts.
No.
Jedi. We'll test your blood later. Any green belts? Kind of yellowy, kind of. Well, there's a few yellowies. Oh, good, excellent. And I could see people out in the cloud are putting their hands up saying, yeah, I'm a black belt, actually. Just like Kevin. So by the way, if you're wondering what the hell is he talking about in terms of, belts and yellow and black and all the rest of it, don't worry. It's one of the strange things that go with this weird world of Lean Six Sigma, as I discovered.
Yeah.
Okay.
Feedback from the cloud is that Lee is a green belt. Yeah. So you do have
Lee. Oh, good, excellent, well done, Lee. Yeah, great. Okay, super. Well, maybe we'll do a bit more demystification as we go through the session this evening. So a little bit about myself. You might want to know. And by the way, you may notice that I haven't got 100 PowerPoint slides. I'm sure you're hopefully not too disappointed. Oh, they're looking really disappointed now. Oh, surely. So no PowerPoint at all, but I'm aided by the. We're into technology tonight, Don. So I'm using my iPhone. So if it collapses and goes in a heap, then we're back to the paper that Jenny, my colleague Jenny from Catalyst in the corner, has probably hasn't got, because we are dependent upon this technology. So what can I say? First of all, I'm not English. Surprise look there, shock. I'm from Wales. Anybody else from Wales? No? Okay. Relatives.
Which counts.
That counts, okay. You can qualify for a slight Welsh accent then. I am Welsh, originally from Cardiff, so I'm a Celt, interested in continuous improvement from Cardiff, and I started life always interested in, I'm getting nervous about the camera now, always interested in how things work. Fascination about how things work. So I'd like to tell you my story, and hopefully if you learn on the learning curve that I've been on and see how I've learned about a wide range of tools and techniques and how I fit those together with the aim of improving the way that work is done, okay? So once upon a time, a long time ago, born not with a silver spoon, more of a soldering iron actually, but it was a difficult birth. I was a curious boy. I meant curious about things, and so I became. Guess what I became? What do you become if you're a curious person? You become an engineer. How many other engineers? Are there some other engineers? I sense engineers in the room. Good. Yes, you have that good engineering look about you. I like that. So I became an engineer, and of course engineers were always interested in how things work. So I did electronics at university, then became an electronics engineer and a software engineer. And I became more and more curious about how organizations work. Or don't. The thing about engineers is that we're always interested in how things work, and we're also interested in improving the way that things work as well, and how to make things work much better, and how to ensure that when they do work, that they're easy to maintain. Okay, so think about that in terms of an organisational context. And really what we want to do is to create organisations that don't, and things that don't take much looking after either, perhaps.
Okay, just another interrupt from the
Yes.
crowd. You have some Welsh people out there, Lee again,
Oh,
and also
Lee.
some engineers and scientists.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I can feel the Celtic coming toward us and the rugby ball coming towards us as well. Excellent stuff. So think about that as understanding how things work, okay? So assessing, improving, or innovating, and making things work better, and then easy to maintain. So today, you'll notice there are no PowerPoint slides. In fact, what we're going to do is a bit of a kind of experiment in that we're going to create our own slides together ourselves. So you've got on your paper, you should have a blank sheet of paper, and if you want more blank sheets of paper, we have them at the back, no expense spared. So what you'd like me to do is we're going to create our own slides, and we're going to see if we'll be interested to see, and the person who has the best product at the end of the evening session will be my pet, really, my teacher's pet, and they will be awarded with the wonderful book, Lean Six Sigma for Dummies. I know, it's terrible, isn't it? So, yeah, they'll really look disappointed now, everybody. They really look, oh dear, have you got chocolate or something? So we could try a talk experiment and we can make them up as we go. So here we go. So across the top of your sheet of paper, what I want you to write is 3 words. They'll become columns, right? So on the first word on the left-hand side is the word assess, in big capitals. Assess, A-S-S-E-S-S, I think. And then in the middle, we're going to have the word improve. Now you can do this at home, ladies and gentlemen, in your pyjamas. And on the right-hand side, we're going to have the word again at the top, the word maintain. Okay? Now if you underline the A and the I and the M, what you get, of course, is aim. Great. Okay, so let's go back. That's enough on the slideware for a minute. We'll come back to that in a second. What we're now going to do is talk a little bit more about my life as a career in engineering. So I was really interested in how things work, as I was saying. There is a reason for going through this, by the way, you'll see it. And I became, I have to say, with some hesitation, an amateur radio enthusiast. Now, you didn't expect me to say that, did you?
Yes.
You did?
No.
Are there any other amateur radio enthusiasts? Actually, I've lapsed.
I have done it.
We've lapsed. We've lapsed, haven't we? I mean, just look at us. We've definitely lapsed in a number of ways. So, and for a while, I was a teenager. I know. At the time, it was a balanced life between amateur radio and maintaining the motorcycle engineer. And then I got older, and other things happened. So, but I don't recommend trying out any of those techniques on that side, if you like, by the way. So anyway, I used to do projects. So projects, really important, projects. Projects are interesting, okay? They have beginnings, middles, and ends. You know, doing something, a task. So I lived in projects. And I kind of like build a new radio transmitter, project. I'm not kidding. I used to use the word project when I was a kid. Rebuild the motorcycle engine. That was a project. I was thinking of that. And as I got into my real job, as I kind of got into the big mothership of British Telecom, BT. Now, here's a sample. One of the tools you learn, of course, in the Lean Six Sigma Toolkit is sampling. And so what I could do now is I could sample this group of people we've got here, this STEAM group in front of me. And my reckoning is, because of the way things are, that there's a fair chance that at least one of you, at some point in your careers, has worked for the mothership of BT. Would that be correct? Anybody open up? Who's worked for BT? There he is. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. You haven't worked for BT, have you, Brendan?
No.
That would be amazing timing if you had, by the way. That would be good. So, sorry, what your name was?
My name's Lambros.
Oh, brilliant. So we have a BT colleague there. So that's interesting. Now, BT is a very large organisation, as you know. And when I landed in there as a little graduate, I did projects. That's what I did. So the beginning, middle, and end stuff, and that was fine. And I certainly wasn't in a position to question the way things were done. In fact, I had advice. So just keep your head down, keep your nose clean. Don't do anything. You know, don't ask for God's sake, don't ask the question why. just get on with it. But I got on with my job, and I couldn't help thinking that the way we had to do things wasn't exactly always that brilliant. You know, there was a lot of what I would call faffing about. Faffing about. It's a technical expression. I didn't know the right words to use in those days. I didn't understand anything about, you know, words like waste or mudda. You know about mudda, M-U-D-A, which is a Japanese word which means waste in organisations. I didn't know any of that stuff. All I knew was it didn't seem that good. And I got frustrated. There seemed to be a lot of overlap as well between different departments and different teams, where I was not in a position to question things. I was frustrated. I couldn't help thinking, there has to be a better way of doing things. So after a good number of years running projects, I moved into an operational role, okay, in a business unit. And I heard a new word mentioned, bandied around, which it confused me a bit to start with, and I wasn't quite sure what it was. I thought, what was that word? It was the word process. See you gripped. It's a bit of a dodgy word, really. And really, now, I guess you all know, because you're at the quality thing here, and you're bound to know what the word process is. But I'd be interested to know, and I do ask this question, I do a lot of executive workshops now, and I ask that question, what does the word process conjure up in your mind? And I ask it very specifically with those exact words. What does it conjure up in your mind? And I just let people have a little chat with your next door neighbours for a minute to see what reaction we get. And is it kind of like a good word or a bad word around here? So I think what we should do, are we allowed to have little kind of chats and things? I think we should have a little tiny breakout session now, so I can have a cup of tea, just for a second. And if you wouldn't mind, with your next door neighbours, have that conversation about, what does the word process conjure up in your mind? So we'll have a little breakout. You can do that at home as well, and we'll have the feedback. Thank you. If you just do that, what does the word process conjure up in your mind? Muttering is okay. Yes.
Yeah, I got half of them quite old. My wife oh, well, you're through the
My dad had it oh, wow. Which organisation was that?
measures bespoke, produced, designed and produced
Okay. You see what happens? This is the secret now. What you have to do when you go to that party on Saturday night, if you really want to get people buzzing, ask the question as, what does the word process conjure up? Maybe not, but it certainly got you lot buzzing. So some initial feedback then from my friends up here. You said the word process was core, was it? Or
yeah, it was. It's basically as far as the business we're in, it's core, but it was a sequence of events which had a defined start, a chunk in the middle which actually sorted it out, and an end.
Sequence of events,
Yep.
Start and a bit of a middle and an end.
Yes.
But it's kind of an event sequence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Anything you want to add? No. Okay. Over here, process conjured up in your world. What was the conversation about?
So we started off with some of the negative connotations around bureaucracy and waste, and then we started to get a little bit more cheerful and talked about the benefits of standardisation and things like that.
Very good. Okay. And the second row, I like that expression.
We were talking about inputs, changing activities and value adding and outputs.
Very good. Very SciPocky. Okay, we'll talk more. Yeah. Okay. What? Any other comments about the word process?
We were the same as the first three.
Yeah. Good.
But essentially, there's
Yeah.
a need to change something.
Yeah.
You've got something you need to change it
Yeah.
to something else.
For a
Yeah.
reason, there's
For a
rationale
reason.
behind it.
There's a rationale behind it. Okay. At the back row there.
Oh, we were just talking about how we kind of sell it to those around us, and just that
Yeah.
we point out that everything, literally everything's a process.
That's my view as
Everything
well.
you do is a process.
Yeah.
It's just what controls you.
Yeah,
around it,
that,
so how it
that,
works.
I mean, it's a dodgy word, but it's the best we've got, I think. I mean, we love to kind of come up with another word, which was a bit, sort of cooler, but I don't think we can, actually. I think that's the way. How about over here, our friends in Lloyd's Register?
And we just discussed that it's a difficult word to explain.
Yes, it is.
So to different people, they are more or less interested depending on where in the organisation they sit.
Yeah, it's okay. So, and at the back row again, any further comments there about the word process?
Much new to add. It adds a structure.
Adds a
What
structure,
you do,
yeah.
Controls what you
Yeah, there's a serious reason, because I think when you are talking to senior executives, and obviously the title is about senior leaders, it does have connotations, and we do have to work with that, and I have to spend a bit of time explaining before we go any further into the world of Lean Six Sigma what we mean by process. What we mean by process is the way work gets done, and I think that really kind of highlights it. It's the way work gets done. It may not be documented, it may not be very bureaucratic, it may not be particularly wonderful process, it might be a really bad process, but turning off, please wait. Is that a hint?
I've got some feedback.
And you've got some feedback as well. Okay, Don, fire away.
Well, of course, these are not team feedbacks, these are personal feedbacks, but according to Heather, a process is doing things in a planned and correct way. Some senior management would say restrictive.
Yeah, it's the same as yours.
Another, Steve says, a method for moving an input into an output.
Yeah.
And the last one, Lee says, an end-to-end stream of actions which is repeatable by the next person. And Christopher says, a group of activities required to achieve the required result. Actually, you've got them all going.
Okay, I told you it gets them. You'll be here all night. So we so it's the way of working. Would you agree? A process, yes, is the way of working, and I much prefer that, because if you think about it, it's W-O-W, which is wow, that's good. So maybe that's better. Okay, so along the route, back to the education now, I decided it was about time I got some formal qualifications in a non-technical, because I'd done all the kind of maths and physics and goodness knows what, and engineering and what have you. So I decided to do a management postgraduate course in management, and honestly it was probably the best educational thing I did, and I would certainly recommend that I ever did. Learning about management, motivation, change, the theories of organisation and management and leadership and accounts and marketing and goodness knows what else. It was a real eye-opener, and to be honest I couldn't wait to apply it in practice. So that's part of it. So at this point I moved away from my technical background into a team which was to help on large-scale organisational projects, a lot of large-scale organisational projects going on in the mothership BT at that time. Organisational development and quality was the name of the team, looking at how the organisation was organised. And my curiosity was still there, and it was now getting to the point where I felt maybe I could start to contribute to my frustration somehow. So I got introduced to a number of different tools and techniques and methods and all the rest of it. In particular, at that time, and we're probably talking kind of early 90s, I guess, I was introduced to a model of excellence called the EFQM model. I noticed you had EFQM down on that possible list, And I found that was, intuitively, I found it a very appealing model, actually, because it sort of covered all the things you needed to think about if you wanted to run, a really great, brilliant, super organisation, sort of things like leadership and strategy and so on and so forth. I'm very interested, by the way, and I don't know if you're aware that there's a new standard called ISO 9004, which has just come out, or just coming out at the moment. And it's all about the quality of an organisation, very holistic, and there are so many similarities there. It was actually Estelle who pointed that out to me the other day when I was meeting here at the CQI building in London. And yeah, it's really good if you want to have a read. It's quite long, you know, it's about 60 pages, and it's written as an ISO standard, so you have to kind of work your way around it. But in there's some really good material. So I think it's nice to see this kind of a holistic model of organisational assessment beginning to develop into the real kind of, you know, core quality community. So that's exciting, actually. And I mean, that kind of model, it doesn't really matter which model you've got, but that kind of model, which covers all the things you need to think about if you're going to run a brilliant company, it's essentially what it's about. It still is a great kind of model to have to help you to assess your organisation. Okay, so under the heading assess, if we go back to our slide that we're building up here, our slow build, of course we put down things like EFQM self-assessment, business excellence model. Excuse me a second. And so under the assess heading, put down ISO 9004 as well, because I think alongside ISO 9004 there's also a really interesting assessment model at the back of it, and a maturity grid. And I quite like maturity-based assessments as well, so that's neat. Okay, so assessing the organisation, and of course you have to assess the whole organisation. Under the assess heading, you will also include things like, you know, process health checks, and obviously auditing as well going in there. So we're checking out how well are we doing against the standard, how well are we doing against benchmarks, how well are we doing across this whole organisation ideally. If you want to, I won't go through the whole model thing because it's not really my intention to cover the EFQM model, but it does cover a very wide range of both what they call the enablers, the things like leadership, management of people, development of strategy, and so on, as well as the results side. So it's a very balanced model. You know, we're looking at customer results, looking at financial results, looking at the results from the employee perspective and impact on society. So it's a nice generic model, which I found it very, very useful. So I took to that very much. By the way, a less well-known aspect of the EFQM model is something they developed quite a while ago, and they've updated relatively recently, called the Fundamental Concepts of Excellence. There are 8 of these, and if you're really fast at writing, you get these. But just get a feel of this, right? These are less well-known, I think, in the world, because the 9 criteria are well-known. But the 8 Fundamental Concepts of Excellence are really good. Adding value to customers, well, I don't think you'd have a problem with that. Creating a sustainable future. Developing organisational capability, absolutely. Harnessing creativity and innovation. Okay. Leading with vision, inspiration, and integrity. Okay. And managing with agility. If you want to, I can do a pre-seed version of this to send to you afterwards. Would that help, actually? Because I know people are beginning to struggle now and thinking, oh, I want my PowerPoint slides. And succeeding with through the talent of people and sustaining outstanding results. So it's a very interesting model when you look at it. I don't think anybody who is into kind of organisational quality is going to have a problem with that. So I liked it. I became an assessor for the UK Excellence Awards, and I got to know the British Quality Foundation, living in England now, by the way. Became a senior assessor and eventually started to deliver the assessor training as well for both the British Quality Foundation and the European Foundation for Quality Management. And in BT, the mothership, we made extensive use of that model, actually, the assessment model, business excellence model, and virtually all our businesses were going through this some kind of assessment process, whether it was workshops or whatever, at this kind of period of time. But after a while, we realised, and you'll see why I'm leading up to this now, that it wasn't enough. There was something missing after the assessment. Assessing was okay, but it wasn't enough. And some senior executives were actually getting a bit tired, to be honest, of doing an annual assessment without always seeing great improvements happening in between. Remember, it's a tough thing. And it's tough on leadership, actually, when you go out in and do an assessment on the organisation, because you're kind of facing them up to a mirror and saying, this is what you look like, you know, magnifying glass, and seeing things that you probably didn't really want to see. So the question was, what happened after the assessment? And the tendency, I'm afraid, was to jump straight to kind of action planning and solutions. So the best thing we did was to run typically an action planning workshop, and taking the outputs of the model assessment that we'd done, and that there was a real kind of strong focus on we must end up this workshop with some actions. Let's go and do some stuff. And it was a bit jumping to solutions in some cases without really doing a rigorous, deep underneath kind of root cause problem solving approach. It wouldn't have seemed right to not kind of have, okay, the actions are this, and that was the culture at the time. Now, we were pretty good at project management, which is great if you know what the solution is, but what we weren't so good at was working out the best solution, okay, especially if it was quite a complex issue, yeah? So we knew we had a problem, but we didn't really know the right solution, and we would sort of focus on the symptoms rather than on the root causes. Not that good. And there was also a tendency sometimes not to link things as well as they could have been to the business strategy, business planning. And to be honest, I remember business planning was in a different department anyway, so there was a bit of that going on. By the way, there was a ton of stuff on about how quality was perceived as well. Very conscious of that. In my career, I kind of moved into further up the scale, and in the end I ended up running I was head of quality for the whole of BT actually. So I had all of the quality managers brought together, and I think at that time, and still now, I think we've got probably the biggest certificate in the world in terms of, because we brought it all under one certificate, went for ISO, obviously ISO 9000 and ISO 14000 and all the rest of it. So we were very ahead of the game and really worked very closely with, at that time it was LRQA, it's now called Management Systems, LR. So,
LR Management Systems.
Yeah, very good. LR Management Systems, very good. So that was interesting, and that got me more into the world of, the quality world and that you are in, I guess, really. So that was good, and it got me onto things like the technical committee at LRQA as well, which was very, very interesting for me as well to get involved in that world. So my view was that everything to do with quality or business excellence was about running today's organisation really well and creating organisations that are needed in the future, particularly important in a rapidly changing environment, and BT certainly has been for goodness knows how long in a very rapidly changing technological environment. And I was reminded of early studies from my management studies of some work that had been done by a couple of guys called Burns and Stalker. And this goes way back, probably way back, almost the 60s, and looked at different types of organisation needed in different types of environment. If there was a rapidly changing environment going on, so say a technological change, political environmental change, then they use the word organic organisation was needed. If little change was going on, then they use the word mechanistic. It's quite stuck with me. A mechanistic organisation, a more bureaucratic organisation, would probably do fine. So that thing about linking the shape and the style of the organisation to the environment and change, well, if you think about it, it makes sense. If something's changing, if the environment's changing very fast, then the thing has to adapt and change very quickly as well. And I think that was something was really stuck with me, actually, that whole idea of organic organisations and mechanistic organisations. And by the way, I would always encourage my teams and the people who worked with me to read up as much as they could and spend time just reading kind of management stuff. And I pay the bill. If you want to go and buy a management textbook, just go and get it, because I think even if you're not going to read it all, because you're not going to read it all. I don't know if anybody's actually read the whole of that. But by the way, if you did read the whole of that, you'd definitely be a green belt. And if you do read it, by the way, and the winner tonight, whoever gets it, will find that there is a secret reference to Pink Floyd deep in there, but I'm not going to tell you where it is. So in 2000, I was still curious. I left the mothership, having a great interest in how organisations work or don't, with a really great toolkit to help assess organisations, but how to drive improvement, how to drive change and do that well as well. And along comes Six Sigma. In fact, we'd already been looking at Six Sigma and Lean back in those days in the 90s, and we'd researched it. I had a little team looking at the future of quality, and they researched into the work going on in places like Motorola and Toyota and GE. And that was great, actually. And I discovered Six Sigma, and to be honest, I took to it like a duck to water. I guess maybe because of my kind of background, my technical background as well, it kind of fitted with me. I liked the logic of it, and I particularly liked the problem-solving method as well. So if you would like, I was going to put it on a flip chart, but don't worry, there's 5 words that you need to write down now. Define, you'll know this, Kevin. You can do this.
Measure.
Define, measure, good man. Yeah, I'm not going to test you. Define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. So define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. These are the 5 phases of the problem-solving methodology that Motorola invented way back when they were first inventing the kind of Six Sigma concept, actually. And it's a problem-solving methodology, and it's fine. It works, So we get into analyze, we get to the root cause, we ask the question why. It's okay to ask the question why. In fact, we encourage that, during the analyze phase. We set up little project teams to tackle particular issues and problems, and there is a framework of all these funny coloured belts and things that comes into play as well. So there's a whole kind of infrastructure, there's a governance structure, and it worked, Now the Sigma side of it, I don't know if you're into that at all. So you'd be an expert in this, being a black belt, but he's keeping his head down. So just to demystify you on Sigma, I've given you a copy of the pocket guide that we have. It's one of our things in Catalyst. We have lots of pocket guides and stuff. So this is the Lean Six Sigma. I'm sorry to you at home, you haven't got one of these. The Lean Six Sigma Improvement Journey Pocket Guide. And you'll notice that it opens up, it's a bit like origami. And there's lots of stuff in there. It describes the DMAIC stages, define, measure, analyze, improve, control. Again, what I can do is I can email you a kind of sort of modified version of this, if you like. Okay. Which is the one I gave out at the webinar this morning to people online. And that describes those high-level stages. But there's also a chart for the technically minded, which is a process sigma table. So Six Sigma, it's funny really, because the whole idea of Six Sigma is now kind of almost evaporated into more of a name that's a brand. But actually, technically, you might want to know what Six Sigma defines a pretty high level of quality. If you look at the top corner, you'll see that Six Sigma, it's all about understanding variation and measuring things like standard defect. Come on with that in a minute. And understanding how many defects are occurring. When we're talking about defect, that's when we're not meeting our customer requirements. So we're pretty clear and precise about what that means. So 99.999, 5 nines, and all the 6s, that's a positive yield. That represents around about 3.4 defects per million opportunities, so it's a pretty high level of quality. That's Six Sigma, okay? The scale does go higher than that, by the way, and as you can see, it goes down lower as well. So if you're flying around in those wonderful Rolls-Royce engines on the wing, the systems they've got in place in Rolls-Royce are absolutely fabulous, as you may know. They're taking it way above Six Sigma and all that kind of stuff. So really brilliant stuff going on and fantastic quality. And they really have got marvellous systems in place. It has to be admired, especially engineers just admire the whole way they monitor engines while they're in flight and all the rest of it. So that's the flight systems, and apparently, according to a programme on television that was broadcast about a year or so ago called A City in the Sky, there are about 1 million passengers flying around this planet at any moment in time, which is incredible, really, isn't it? Now, if we talk about 6 Sigma, 9 Sigma, whatever, parts per billion, let's talk about the baggage handling system. Do you think that's 6 Sigma? No. Okay, again, on that programme, so I can quote from the programme rather than anybody else. So we do happen to know a thing or two about baggage handling. But if we do come down the scale, for every 1,000 passengers, that are going through Heathrow, there's about 13 or 14 people have problems with their luggage, which is actually pretty high, really, when you think about it, because if you think about how many people get off an A380 nowadays, it's not very good. So if we look at the defects per 1,000, it's just a sort of divided by 10 thing here, and come down to what would that be? What would your sigma value then be if your defect rate was say 13.9 defects per 1,000? Can you shout out?
19.6.
So we come down the scale there, 13.9. We go across to the left, and the sigma value. Who said that? 3.7. Good stuff. Okay, got your eye on you. Good stuff. So the sigma value 3.7. Do you think we could improve the baggage handling system to sigma value of 6? Humankind probably could if we really wanted to. Would it be worth it? No, of course it wouldn't. There's better things to do in life, aren't there, really? So it's a scale. And if you are interested in the way it kind of works, if I give you a set of 10 numbers coming out now, okay, so you've got to write down, next slide, 10 numbers coming, okay. Actually, let me explain while you're getting a piece of paper ready what this is. This is how long it takes when you're waiting in a Premier Inn for your poached egg to arrive at breakfast. Because in a Premier Inn, as you may or may not know, useful information if you don't, you can always order a poached egg, which I think is rather nice, and it's done freshly for you as well. So my critical to quality requirement, CTQ in lingo, is I want my poached egg in less than 5 minutes. Reasonable? Yeah. So anything greater than 5 minutes, to me, that's a defect. Anything less than 5 minutes, I'm happy. Now, I've got other CT, critical to quality requirements for egg poaching, but we won't go into those at the moment. Let's just concentrate on this one measure. So here we go. We did a sample. We like sampling. Sample of 10. First poached egg took 8 minutes. Oh, no. The second time, it was 4. Okay, so here come the rest of the numbers, like a telephone number now. 3, 6, 2, 2 again, 7, 3, 6, 4. Now you should have 10 numbers there. 8, 4, 3, 6, 2, 2, 7, 3, 6, 4. So the first person that can work out the mean average for that set of numbers? Pretty easy. Divide by 10.
4.8.
4.5 is correct. Okay, that's good. So yes, the book's drifting in the right direction. And okay, so now can anybody tell me what the standard deviation is of that? Oh, that's really cruel, Martin. Honestly, what's the standard deviation? The standard deviation is one of those things that you learn about in school, and a lot of people in business never actually get on and do anything to do with it. So all my experience of Six Sigma training, Lean Six Sigma training, I mentioned the word standard deviation. Now you probably, oh, he's working it out. I love it. So roughly speaking, okay, here we go then. The standard deviation, by the way, in case you don't know, is how far away on average are all the numbers from the mean. Now with that in your mind, somebody give me a kind of, I reckon it's about, think about 4.5. How far away on average are all the numbers from the mean? What do you reckon?
2.
2, spot on. Well, that was you, wasn't it?
It was.
Okay. That's good. So yeah, it is 2. And actually the whole thing about sigma comes from the Greek letter sigma, and it's actually that mathematical denotation of the standard deviation. So actually when Motorola came up with this really complicated way of working out what Six Sigma was and all the other sigmas, they really came up with quite a complicated way. You have to kind of reduce the amount of variation that exists in the process so that it meets the customer requirements more and more and more of the time, until there's very few times when it's not meeting the customer requirement. And that's all about reducing the variation, hence the link to the standard deviation. We'll go into the complications of how they actually worked it out. So that's Six Sigma then. And what about lean? So lean thinking originates from the other side of the planet, from the American Motorola-oriented Six Sigma. It originates from Japan, really kind of Toyota thinking, although Toyota wouldn't call it lean at all. If you go into a Toyota factory, as I would recommend if you haven't been able to go in one, they're amazing. They talk about the Toyota production system, certainly in the motor car side, although they are now doing other things in other parts of Toyota as well. In fact, we're actually going to be doing a little bit of work with one part of Toyota soon, which is really exciting. So that's good. So the whole thing about lean thinking is about understanding, certainly looking at process, the way work is done. I'm trying to understand how much waste is there in our processes. Okay. So waste is, all that frustration I was saying before about, things not happening right first time and just thinking there's a lot of faffing about. That's all waste. Waiting for things. Toyota have this, we have this great expression, Tim Wood. I don't know if you've come across Tim Wood. TIM stands for transportation waste. Inventory is a waste, kind of waiting around for things. Waiting actually is a waste as well. M for motion, kind of the workplace and how it is for people, making it better for them. And then we get on to the wood side of it. W stands for waiting. I'm waiting for authority, I'm waiting for this, waiting for that. O, there's two O's, one for overproduction, which of course leads to inventory, so it's really bad waste. And another one for over-processing, which is one of my favourite wastes, really, because I think we do tend to make things more complicated when we need to in organisations, in business. We add extra bits onto processes and so on and so forth, yeah? And what's at the end? Wood, D. Okay, D, defects. So that's really what we've been talking about. My egg's late, that's a defect. Okay, now that's the 7 waste, Tim Wood. By the way, there's a good rugby player, but he was English, not Welsh, so I can't talk about it, called Tom Wood. That's another story. Go off on tangents. If I go off on tangents, I'll talk really fast to save time. Good, excellent. So, where was I? Oh, that's right. Yeah, so Tim Wood. We can add the S on the end as well to make, because obviously Japan likes 7. It's a nice number. 8, not so good. So we can add S. S to anybody? S stands for?
Underutilisation of staff.
Yes, it's about skills. Yes, skills or staff. And the talent that's in your staff and your people in your organisation that is underutilised. And boy, is there loads of that knocking around. So all very good. All very good. So where are we now? Great. Okay, so Lean Six Sigma, embodied in the book, is really bringing together the two approaches. It's blending the whole thing together now. In taking the best bits out of Lean, taking the good bits out of the best bits out of Six Sigma as well. And in fact, the great thing about Lean Six Sigma is, and when Wiley approached us originally to write that book, they said we want a European author who kind of can put the whole lot together, because the trouble is some people kind of are in partitions, and particularly Americans actually. There was the Lean camp and there was the Six Sigma camp, and they wouldn't talk to each other. And we said, well, we're not like that. Our approach is that we'll take the best of both worlds. In fact, we've actually now integrated into it agile thinking, from the world of software, because we want to speed up Lean Six Sigma, because one of the criticisms has been, it takes too long to run these kind of projects. So we're finding, actually, this is real up-to-date stuff, that by integrating some of the techniques from the agile world, which has its origins in software development, but now through the Agile Business Consortium is extending more widely into the business sector. Very interesting, actually. And finally, change management. So integrating change management, the tools and techniques associated with gaining acceptance, getting buy-in, overcoming resistance to change. Because at the end of the day, when you think about that improve bit in the middle that you've got in the middle of that slide that you're developing there, you've got, put in here now, you've got your Lean and your Six Sigma, your change management tools, project management goes in there. You keeping up to date? Keeping that slide going? So all those tools and techniques are really going into the middle bit, the improve or innovate. There is actually another methodology which is less well known around in the world of Lean Six Sigma called Design for Six Sigma, which is about innovation and design, which is something which I think is not known enough about really, but that would go in there as well. So innovation, innovative thinking, design thinking, all those lovely things go in the middle about making change happen. So the way to make Lean Six Sigma appeal to senior executives, which is where we started, and the whole purpose for the new book, which is called Lean Six Sigma for Leaders, is it's all about making change happen in a kind of systematic way, being systematic about innovation. That's really interesting. How are we doing for time, Don?
10 to 8, so I think we're going all right.
Okay, I'll have to get my. We'll start to kind of, okay, good, right, good, excellent. In that case, let's just get some props out, because we need to liven things up a bit now. So does anybody know what this is? This is a wombat. Yeah, so there you are. You're not allowed to have it, but you can borrow it. There you are. You can take it to Addenbrooke's as well. Probably could do with looking after. But a wombat stands for, it's about those 7 wastes that you can't remember now, because oh God, what were they all? Forget that. Think about wombat. Waste of money, brains, and time. Just love that. We're working with one CEO, weren't we, with Jenny? We went in with. So tell me about all this Lean Six Sigma thing, and we were talking about it. And we got onto the bit about waste and mentioned the wombat. He said, "Oh, yeah, sounds good." So I got a little wombat out of my bag. It was a much smaller one. It flew across and landed in his lap, and he decided he liked his wombat, so he decided to keep it. And he put it on his desk, actually, so when anybody would come in, what's that? That's a wombat. I'm trying to get rid of, waste, all this waste of money, brains and time stuff. There's so much waste in this organisation. And they put posters up around the organisation with, I'm sorry about the wombats, because they're lovely. They are lovely animals. If anybody's phoning in from Australia, we don't have anything against wombats. They had posters up with, find the wombats and all that kind of stuff. And the other thing, of course, which we could just... Always have lots of props in the doing things. You know what's going on about the eggs? Very good catch. Well, you're a black belt. You're an expert at it. Oh, sorry, it was a bit of a low throw there. And so yeah. So the reason for the eggs, of course, is to liven up training sessions, and there's nothing like getting. I was doing a session like this as a speech in Glasgow about a year ago, and I decided it was after lunch, so I decided to really liven up. So I actually got some real eggs as well. So I haven't actually done that. I'm not going to do that again. And you have to make sure you get the right eggs. When you're throwing them out to the audience, and the whole point about that is to liven up the conversation about poached eggs and things. And if we had more time, what we could develop is a high-level model of a process, a generic model of a process, which in the Six Sigma world, or Lean Six Sigma world, we call a SIPOC, which really describes what are the main process steps, what are the outputs of that process, who are the recipients or customers of those outputs. You can do it for egg boiling or egg poaching, and it kind of gets you thinking process. But you guys, I could tell right from the beginning when we did that thing about, what does a process conjure up? You already got that in your mind about, inputs, outputs, suppliers, customers, so you'd have no problem with that. You probably already do that anyway. And actually interesting, in that new standard, ISO 9004, mentions, I was really pleased to see, very similar to that kind of diagram in there as well. So what you can think about is, what are your organisation's processes? We won't go into that now. What are the organisations that you're supporting? Because at the end of the day, what Lean Six Sigma is all about is changing the way the work gets done. And that's what we mean by process. So it's a process improvement methodology, a whole variety of tools, but that's really kind of, sell that. So my job is to sell this idea to executives so they kind of think, actually, yeah, this is something we should give it a go. So we're building up our picture. We've got the assess side done. We've got the improve side, but we haven't done the maintain side yet. So we need to make sure that we've got some good tools and techniques that help us to maintain. And Lean Six Sigma has some of that already built into the control phase anyway. And obviously a good quality management system will fit in under there as well, as you know. So if you've got a good quality management system, in a sense, I guess a good quality management system is everything that you've got written down on that page, really holistic one. But thinking about visual management, thinking about performance management, getting the right metrics in place, thinking about control charts. Control charts, very underutilised tool in my experience in non-manufacturing, and they are really, really neat. It links again to the understanding variation and understanding what normal looks like and what kind of abnormal looks like, and being able to get early warnings when things are going wrong. Very powerful tool. So you can put your traditional quality management systems in there as well. So now you can see I hope the important central role in the middle of that page that you've got that Lean Six Sigma can bring you. Okay. So it's a wide toolkit, and I haven't talked about the extensive toolkit because obviously bringing it all together, there are, just like any skilled craftsman or woman, you've got a wide range of tools. If you've done black belt, you have a really big toolkit there to be able to call upon. But it's your favourite tools. You have some favourite tools. Like imagine if you were a locksmith. Anybody any good at picking locks? These are the empty seats, yeah. Being the curious boy, and I'm still a boy really, we all are, and girls, we kind of have fascination for things like, so I did go through a period about a year and a half ago, deciding I wanted to learn how to pick locks. And if you go on the internet, honestly, it's amazing what you find if you get into that world. There's lock picking forums. There's all sorts of. It's actually not that difficult as well, and you get little locks. And be careful what you do here. Just like a skilled locksmith, you can. There are various picks that you have, and you probably have your favourite picks for most of the jobs. I mean, I'm talking about a proper locksmith now, who has to go and help people who've locked themselves out of their houses. Has that ever happened to you? Yes, it has happened to me, and I didn't know how to pick the lock at that stage, so that was a bit of a shame. £100. So then there are the more challenging jobs where the black belt Lean Six Sigma expert is going to come in with the heavy duty kind of carbide drill, really. And boy, oh boy, do you need for some of those locks. If you can, I have done this actually once. You really need a proper drill, a very special drill, a solid carbide tip, and that it will eventually get through, and it all comes to part. So those tools and techniques in the Lean Six Sigma toolkit, which you get trained on as a kind of black belt and even a master black belt, you're not going to use them very often, but they're great fun. So in the world of Lean Six Sigma, the favourite picks are things like the Charter, the SciPark we mentioned, the Understanding the Voice of the Customer, the CTQ we briefly mentioned, Pareto charts, fishbone diagrams, data collection, sampling, process mapping, value stream mapping, value-add analysis, control charts. There's a really big toolkit there for you to use, and not forgetting developing storyboards so that you can learn from each of the projects that are run as well, and share that learning around the organisation. Less used, but still have their place, are some of the more esoteric statistical tools that come more from the Six Sigma background, such as hypothesis testing. There are different types of statistical hypothesis testing you can do, regression analysis, design of experiments, interesting stuff, and quality function deployment. So these are the more kind of fun end, if you're the right person. You really need to be the right kind of person to do that kind of training, though. So don't send people who really don't get it. So my recommendation, if you are advising people about which training to go on, put them through, start off at the basic level, by the way, is a kind of a white belt is a general awareness. So it's kind of a bit more than what we're doing now, but that's kind of the general awareness for everybody, maybe an hour or two chit-chat about the whole approach, demystify it. A yellow belt is a 2-day typically, or an online program if you want it. I'm not going to sell stuff, I'm not here to do that. Green belt is typically a basic green belt course, maybe about a week. Very popular actually, those kind of courses. But then upgrade. That's what I'm saying. Upgrade to black. Don't advise people to go straight to black because I think it's too much for them. And in fact, some of the lessons that have been learnt in the early days of Six Sigma were, particularly in GE actually, I think they probably trained too many people too fast at a very high level and put a lot of people off. So, gently as you go. Okay, so I think DMAIC is brilliant, as you probably realise, starting with a problem and an open mind about the right solution. And it could be a more lean project than a Six Sigma project, that's perfectly okay, but still use DMAIC though, because it is, even if you're running rapid improvement workshops, it's still very useful to do that. Okay, so, and by the way, you don't even have to call it Lean Six Sigma. As again, in the new book we talk about this, some of the organisations that we work with don't like the expression Lean Six Sigma because it has kind of connotations of people worry about manufacturing and all that. And if you think process is a dodgy word, I mean, Lean Six Sigma is a really dodgy word. So you don't have to call it that. Operational excellence, business excellence, just call it Lean, but actually underneath the bonnet is a bit of Six Sigma in there as well. All those things. One organisation we worked for called it relentless simplification, which I thought was quite nice. What's it delivered? Well, here's a nice example. It's in North Ayrshire Council, and they had a problem in delivering occupational therapy equipment to people in the community. Now that sounds like that's a really weird example of using. It was okay. They had a problem in delivering this equipment, specialist occupational therapy equipment to people when they come out, particularly when they come out of hospital quickly. You'd identify with this, and they really needed it urgently. And what was happening? It was taken when you measure phase, find out what's really going on, find out the truth, find out the real process. 30 days. It was taking 30 days on average, okay. And they reduced that down to 24 hours. And that kind of thing is, breathtaking, and it's wonderful when you see that. I love local authorities because they have so many different services that they provide to their users. We're just starting actually a fairly big programme with Essex County Council, based in Cambs, one of the largest in the country. And they've been trying out Lean Six Sigma in all manner of places, actually, in school transport, education, the coroner's office, you name it. People are doing it in highways, supply management, and apart from all the usual places that we know and love, I think most factories, production organisations have been doing something like this for years and years and years, otherwise you wouldn't have survived. Service and transactional based organisations, less so finance, insurance, those kind of sectors. Moving out into those areas much more so in the last few years, and still a lot of interest in logistics, in telecommunications, you name it. And Telefonica, another one of our clients, is no secret, everybody knows that. Very different in wide range of areas, including HR and finance as well, and marketing, really interesting. QVC, the biggest shopping channel in the world. They're an interesting one because they have the front-end call centre operations up near Liverpool. They're based in the UK. And that's a nice one to get into. They call it BIG, by the way, business improvement groups. So I quite like that. So you have the big teams. Well, they're not actually big teams, they're little teams focusing on business improvement, but they call it the business improvement groups. And of course they've got their distribution centre as well, so it's kind of covering different aspects of different types of process, which again makes it very interesting. A famous 5-star hotel chain in London, in Park Lane actually, that we worked with in their reception, in concierge, in the supply management side, in housekeeping, in food and beverage. And I must say, I do like that client rather a lot actually, I must say. Nice. Would you like to come in and have a drink in the bar, Martin? Yes, please. The barman's called Giuliano. Okay, so that's my clue. If you know which hotel that is, then you're earning far too much money, and you shouldn't be here, and nor should I. Utilities like Southern Water and United Utilities. I mentioned financial services. Yeah, you name it. Manufacturing, still actually Cooper Vision, contact lens manufacturer, really great. They've been working with us for years. In fact, one of the senior executive who's responsible for manufacturing across Europe, Kevin Barrett, actually contributed to the new book Lean Six Sigma for Dummies. I interviewed him, and I met him about 8 years ago, and it was great to get that picture and the journey they've been on, and his deep belief about this stuff. And it really comes down to culture and developing a culture of continuous improvement. This is not something that you can do overnight. This is not a quick fix. If you want to do it properly, to get that level of understanding and acceptance. What he said was that he didn't force it down on his executive team. He wanted them to be ready for it. So it took about 6 months from the initial. He wanted to do it. Didn't use the Jack Welch style approach, which was kind of you do it. He waited for the executive team around him to kind of feel ready to go for it. And then, of course, it's just history, really. So they've really improved their yield magnificently, and that's serious stuff for a manufacturer of that type, I can tell you. Public services in Northern Ireland, forensic science, where they do drugs analysis, reduce the cycle times through drugs analysis by 50%. Okay, obviously, I think it's brilliant. There are some examples where it hasn't been so brilliant because it's been around for a long time. If you're going to find those kind of examples, if you haven't got the conditions right, if you've got the environment right, if you've got the leadership really on board, you don't have to get the leadership totally on board to start with. I think if you want to get started or recommend to organisations how to get started, then if you can't get the CEO, whoever on board straight away, go and do a pilot somewhere, run a few projects. Jack Welch himself was sceptical originally and he became a convert and they become the greatest advocates. Go and do that and get some good case studies and then show and tell to the wider group, and you'll find that you'll get pull and they'll want to go with you when you do that. So you get permission to go for it. Okay, so probably about time we came to a close now, I think, because I can talk about this all night, as you probably gather. Would have liked to have talked about more about faffing about. That's a favourite subject, and rituals as well, which is kind of the underlying culture web of organisations and how you have to fight against those. That would be good fun to talk about. I think that's enough for now. It's just me, my views, my experience. I hope it will help you in some way, shape or form. You've got that slide in front of you. So at the bottom, across the very bottom, so you've got assess, improve, maintain with tools, tools, tools. Across the very bottom, I put two lines, one going across with the words organize process architecture or something like that, organizational process architecture across as one underlying fundamental that you really have to get right. And underneath that, if you can do it, two words, that's leadership. Support. It's not quite the same as commitment. It's leadership support. Okay? So I think it works. It works by improving customer results and users of products and services, like the lady who needed the orthopaedic equipment so desperately in North Ayrshire. I think it works for society at large. It works for employees, removing those kind of frustrations and all that faffing about that we talked about when I first started working. And it makes workplaces a better place for employees.
Could you
So-
just tell us again what was on the two lines, please?
Yes, one was the organizational process architecture. It's a bit posh, but it's basically the process structure for your organization. And beneath that, the very bottom, I would go across leadership support. So that gives you a big picture now, and I'll send you my version of it as well if you like. Thank you very much for giving me that most precious of resource of yours, which is, of course, your time. Thank you very much indeed. I'll stay for questions, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
And while we're doing the questions and answers and gathering up our props, including our lovely wombat, which we'll put here next to Tom, we need to check out the slides. So I'll just do a quick check, a visual check. Well, you're a black belt, so that's absolutely brilliant, isn't it? I mean, it would be. You're a contender. Oh, God, you're all good. You're really good at this stuff. Help. That's very, God. It's going for the man at the back. Congratulations. Well done. There you go. Sorry, it's only Lean 16 dummies. Don't take it personal or anything. And if you want me to sign it, we'll probably reduce the value on eBay. Yeah, so that's it. Good, well done. I'd love to give you all a copy. You've got the pocket guide, and I will organise through Don and Kevin, I guess, just to get you perhaps some of the key points that I was making, and also maybe one or two slides and things as well, which you can then email out to everybody. Okay, and also the people. Well, thank you for the people who are on the end in the cloud, if anybody's still there. Actually, you are wearing pyjamas, aren't you? You know, it's a two-way thing. Oh, they've walked out now. Any questions? Yes, sir.
So you came down to maintain,
Yes.
and one of the first things you said was control charts.
Well, yeah, visual management, everyday operational excellence, I think, and control charts. I mean,
Yeah.
you could
Yes,
fit
I
that.
understand that. What I was
Yeah.
going to say was, because I'm an old fuddy-duddy now, you see. And so when you get round to control charts, how do you reconcile plus or minus 3 standard deviations as being 6 sigma, and the 6 sigma as defined in this chart?
Okay.
Because you're dealing with
Stop,
somebody
stop, stop,
who's
stop.
picked up 6 sigma and made it what they wanted to be,
Yeah, yeah,
that is different
yeah.
from the traditional 6 sigma.
Yeah, I know. Oh God, I wish you would know. We need to go and have a drink and a beer and talk about this, because it is really, you know, it's so confusing. You're quite right. Okay, in the control charts, typically an upper control limit and the lower control limits are set at plus or minus 3 standard deviations from the mean. That has got nothing to do with the calculation of 6 sigma.
I know.
You know that.
I know.
So isn't it confusing?
Well, it is.
Yes.
Because someone is going to get out a book on control charts
Yes.
and then find 6 sigma,
Yes.
99.8,
Yes.
and how does that reconcile with this
Yes,
chart?
and that's
And it's
completely
just
right.
like the Americans changing a billion into something different,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Well, kind of.
I think, yeah.
Isn't it the difference between voice of the process and voice of the customer? So
Yeah.
your control
Yeah.
chart tells you what your process is
The,
doing.
the control chart is the voice of the process, that's absolutely right. But the calculation, and I really didn't want to get into the mathematical calculation of how it is 6 sigma and the 1.5 sigma shift and all that kind of complicated stuff. To be honest, for me I couldn't care, you know, and I don't really I'm not a great exponent of having to worry too much about all the detailed technicalities of it. I think it is important the tools are applied right to the practitioners, you know, that we train. You know, we train people to black belting, master black belt. Those people really need to know this stuff really well, so they don't make that mistake. And I think in communicating, you know, one of the challenges we have, and we must do that, is to communicate clearly, you know, what we mean and try to demystify the whole idea of 6 sigma. So, I mean, I would have preferred it if we'd have called it lean sigma rather than lean 6 sigma, but unfortunately, I think somebody had the word trademarked or something.
Not
so
even sigma, but another character.
yeah, okay, let me...
Would
let
have
me
been much better at the time.
come along, yeah. But it's become... I mean, I wasn't really nuts on the whole idea of black belts and green belts when that came out, because I thought I'm going to do karate or something, but, you know... but it's stuck, and it's just the way it is, so, you know, I'm happy with it now, it's great.
There's a question here from Robert Griggs. You mentioned rituals, and he's assuming that rituals are part of culture.
Yes.
What type of culture facilitates Lean Six Sigma and which inhibit it?
That's a very good question. So that's an excellent question, actually. And what I would say is that the kind of culture, it's like a culture, if you talk about a culture of continuous improvement, the problem is that many organisations don't have of course they don't have the ideal culture. They don't have the ideal culture when they start off. So, you know, and you can't change culture. You know, I don't think there's such a thing as a successful culture change program. I think culture is the result. It's an outcome of things that go on. It's very closely linked to leadership and leadership behaviour. One of the new members of our team in Catalyst is a Shingo practitioner. I'm not going to go into that today, but I really do like some of that stuff because they talk a lot about the leadership characteristics and the culture of the organisation. There are things that allow you to do maturity checks and assessments of culture as well, which is very interesting. So you can look at the different cultures in different organisations. You know, it's a very good question. I think the kind of organisations, if you are, I mean, I have worked in very strong command and control organisations. I've worked in police forces and things like that as well. But if you are in that kind of organisation, then you do need the person at the top to be kind of commanding and controlling and all the rest of it. And if they change, then the danger is that things kind of fall away. I think the real test with Lean Six Sigma or continuous improvement deployment is when you take, in terms of whether it can stand on its own or whether it's a kind of add-on, is when you take the leader out and whether that will continue to sustain. It's a really big test of an organisation, and unfortunately in our organisations these days, you know, we're changing leadership very, very quickly these days, so it's quite hard to get the momentum there. But, you know, yeah, we could talk about that a lot, and that was one of the things I wanted to do in the new book, So the new book features a number of case studies from organisations that we've worked with. And actually there's quite a lot about culture and change in there as well. And the challenge really of doing that, yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
In the chart, the process sigma table.
Yeah.
Just a point there. I think I'm right in saying that it's not just a case of working out the standard deviation.
No,
so you need to make sure it's in statistical control for it to be valid, don't you?
Yeah, quite right. You know, if we go back to our, I'm glad you mentioned that because it gives me good excuse to go back to. We worked out the mean, we worked out the standard deviation. What we didn't work out was what the sigma value of that process is. Now, if you think about it, if you are smart, you'll notice that 4.5 minutes on average to deliver the eggs, and my requirement was I want my eggs delivered in less than 5 minutes. So on the face of it, I'm doing fine. The process is fine. Its average is 4.5. And so what you really need to understand is the range and the variation that goes on there. And if we have a look at that, you'll see that there are 4 occasions where we didn't meet the requirements, and therefore we call those defects. So in that case, although the average was showing 4.5, fine, it's not at all good because we've got a 40% defect rate. Now, if you turn to the sigma value calculations, you can quickly look at a 40% defect rate is the same as a 60% yield. So that's a sigma of around about 1.75. That's not very good, is it? So yes, you're quite right. I mean, in order to really get underneath it, to get it to work properly, you need to understand the variation, and that's there's good ways of doing that.
I used to have more difficulty in selling that particular point to people who thought they understood it but didn't, and then they wondered why it didn't work at the end of it. And I said it has to be in statistical control.
Yeah.
It was like pushing water uphill as much as anything.
I think what you find in my experience is that there are some great techniques out there which illustrate it very well. Deming's red bead experiment, for example, is a very good illustrative method to when people kind of wake up and go, oh my God, the madness of management. We have always been doing it this way, and we don't understand the importance of random variation and so on. Another one is there's a tool which we use called the quincunx. I don't know if you came across that. And it's basically a whole series of beads that come through a grid, and they drop down visually down through sort of different channels, and you can see the variation building up, the population building up with the little red beads. And it's not the same as a red bead experiment, but it's red actually that you use, and it's just so good because you can then close off an area and then change some of the aspects of the process, maybe introduce a special cause into it, and then play it again, and it's just whoa, it really kind of brings it to life. I think you've got to use these kind of techniques when you're teaching people this stuff so that it brings it to life. Smarties are good too.
Thank you.
I have a question from Lee of Cardiff.
My Welshman.
Your Welshman, yes. It's a bit protracted, so I will read it.
Okay.
Lee asks, or states, I am currently involved in a serious safety issue investigation, and a continuous improvement event has dropped out of it. From our initial 5 brainstorming of issues and affinity diagrams, the issue is due to the training and supervision. The issue is that the organisation is spread over 5 sites in the UK, and there is no parity of training, and hence supervision has no standardised training. As the facilitator, I'm looking for a way to solve this issue. What would you do? I was thinking of value stream map each of the sites, look for commonalities, VSM and ideal, and then try to come up with a standardised central training. What do you think?
Well, I think we should go and get a beer, actually, Lee. The pint of brains is on you. If I come to Cardiff, I'd be great. My hometown.
Cardiff is his
Cardiff
origin
is
rather than where he is at the
Oh,
moment.
okay, sure. Obviously, that's something which is a little bit, it certainly sounds like a challenging situation that you've got there. Certainly, VSM Valley Stream Mapping, absolutely brilliant tool to help to bring things. It sounds as if you've got, as much as anything, it's a cultural issue as well. Again, I'd be hesitant about jumping straight to the solution. So what I would do is I'd say, we know we've got a problem, and sure, there is a problem, and define that problem. Go through the DMAIC stages. I mean, you may have already started it, but in the define phase, the first thing we're going to do is to get a really good statement about the scope of the issue, what the problem is, in other words, what's not happening that should be happening, and I think you've articulated that already. And then start to think about, who are the stakeholders involved. I'm off into a project. I'm off into a DMAIC project, really. And that project could be done, through a series of workshops as well. But it sounds as if, you've already done a bit of that with the brainstorming, the affinitization, and the interrelationship diagram. So, it'd be lovely to chat to you about that offline, really.
Okay. And another question here from Tomas. From your experience, what percentage of continuous improvement projects are Six Sigma based projects in a well-developed organisation?
I suppose it depends what that means by, Six Sigma going. Does it mean going to Six Sigma, or they are Six Sigma?
Are using Six? I assume he means what percentage of improvement projects are using Six Sigma in an organisation which is well-developed.
Well, I think once you get into the situation where, DMAIC becomes the way we do things around here, and becoming this, if you like, it is the standardised process improvement process. This is the important thing, that we have a standard approach to solving business problems. So DMAIC becomes a very important part of that. Of course, there'll be different types of DMAIC projects. There'll be the smallest I've ever done was in a day, by the way, and that was at a GP practice. That was just cracking a particular problem. But then there could be much longer ones, So I think what happens is once you've got the mature level, and we're talking about, continuous improvement maturity, once you get up to the higher levels, as he's intimating, then, basically all of the problem-solving approach, pretty well all of that is going to be DMAIC-based, even if it's only DMAIC as a framework in the back of your head. And I can feel that, Kevin as a black belt nodding here as well on that one, yeah? Okay.
I think that maturity is appropriate when you start identifying who and the resource you need to do some of your improvement projects. We fell into a trap by going and recruiting a lot of black belts,
right,
and then not having the maturity in the organisation that allowed them to spin their magic. We needed a lot of lean people. We didn't need a lot of people, a lot of black belts.
Yeah,
and they got frustrated. And they
I think there's some experiences of that. As I said, in particularly US-based organisations have done that.
The other feedback from Lee is yes, he would be really pleased to get your help. So I'm not quite sure how the two of you are going to get in touch, but I guess there'll be a way. Maybe
there's always a way. That's my motto. There's always a way. Okay. I think people are personally. My sense is from reading the body language, people are kind of getting a bit kind of I want to get to that. I want to A14 and all that kind of jazz. So should we call it to a day? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. And I'm going to hand over to Tony to give a note of thanks.
Okay, yes, well, I can just sum up and then obviously, first and foremost, of course I've got to remember to stand to the camera, haven't I? First and foremost,
I'm out.
First and foremost, Martin, thank you very much on behalf of the Greater Pboro and Cambridge Committee for attending tonight. There were some very interesting points coming out of your presentation, particularly for me as a novice in the field of Lean Six Sigma, where you actually outlined the process involved in gaining the various belts, which I think is useful because you've started off from the beginner's route and taken us through the process. I think it's fair to say that you've given a very good personal insight into your experiences across a number of different organisations, and in particular certainly here we've had a most interactive discussion and session which focused on the process debate. And with that in mind, I'd like to also thank the people who are looking in remotely also for their contributions as well, which we were able to consider. One of the things I'll take away from what you said from tonight in terms of the process debate is that you actually said it's the way work gets done in a challenging environment. And I think that's the key, in that you linked that with the actual Six Sigma journey, and indeed for those of us attending here, of the need to actually understand the waste process. Within the presentation, you also linked it to a number of documents which perhaps weren't first and foremost in everyone's mind. You mentioned ISO 9004, linking it to a quality management system, EFQM, and then of course the Wombat which you bought from Australia.
Actually, I bought it from Amazon. But
Amazon. Suffice to say, the final comment from me, although there is a serious issue behind it, I think most certainly when I attend a premiering in the future and have my poached egg, I don't think I'll be thinking of it in quite the same light again. But, a very useful exercise to outline the theory and process. So all that remains, on behalf of the committee, is for me to give you this little gift as a thank you for your
thank
time.
you very much indeed.
And if I could ask, ladies and gentlemen, could we show our appreciation in the normal manner? Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks. Thank you, Martin. So I'm just going to close by saying thank you everyone for turning up, and thank you for those listening in at home. Please make sure you fill out your feedback forms, and for those online, make sure you fill out the SurveyMonkey request when that comes through. Even if you're here and have filled in a form, you'll still get the email about that. So you can just safely ignore that if you have already filled in the form. Certificates of attendance will be sent out to you later. Make sure you've signed to register. Those online, Don's been signing you in to make sure we've got you. And the next event is 13th of March at Arm Limited in Cambridge. And once again, I advise you to sign up early because the tickets are going fast for that. And have a safe journey home. Thank you very much. Thank you.